There is a shadow fact that the Canadian government and major banks don't want you to whisper at the dinner table. While our postcards show pristine mountains and polite smiles, the statistical reality is a horror story. Canada currently holds the highest household debt-to-income ratio in the entire G7. For every dollar a Canadian earns, they owe roughly $1.80. This isn't just a number. It's a ticking time bomb buried beneath the foundation of every suburban home from Surrey to St. John's. We are living on borrowed time, fueled by a credit-based lifestyle that has become a necessity rather than a luxury. The middle class isn't just shrinking, it's being hollowed out from the inside. You feel it every time you tap your card at the terminal, wondering if this is the month the math finally stops working. We've been told that our banking system is the most stable in the world, a fortress against global volatility. But what happens when the threat isn't an external shock, but an internal rot? The experts are no longer speaking in hushed tones. They are shouting about a structural collapse that could redefine what it means to live in the true north. But there is one specific metric, a dark indicator, that suggests the end is closer than the media admits. Do you know what it is?
Walk into any Loblaws, Sobeys, or Metro today, and you'll witness a silent tragedy. It's the look on a father's face when he puts a pack of chicken breasts back because the price tag looks like a typo. We are living through a grocery crisis that has moved beyond mere inflation into something more predatory. While corporate profits soar into the billions, the average Canadian is choosing between fresh produce and paying the heating bill. The emotional pain is visceral. It's a constant, low-grade fever of anxiety that follows you through the aisles. You remember when $100 filled a cart. Now it barely covers 3 bags of essentials. This is the first crack in the Canadian social contract, the inability to feed one's family without financial trauma. Galen Weston has become the face of this frustration, but the problem goes deeper than one CEO. It's about a supply chain and a regulatory environment that has allowed a virtual oligopoly to dictate the cost of survival. We are being squeezed by the very entities that are supposed to serve us. But the grocery store is just the tip of the iceberg. The real monster is waiting for you at home, and it's tied to the 4 walls you call your sanctuary. Have you looked at your mortgage renewal date lately?
The Canadian housing market is no longer a ladder. It's a fortress with the drawbridge pulled up. In cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the average home price has disconnected so completely from local wages that it feels like a cruel joke. Young professionals, doctors, engineers, and teachers are realizing that even with a 6-figure salary, they are perpetually locked out of the dream their parents achieved on a single clerk's income. The GTA has become a pressure cooker of resentment. Basement apartments are renting for $3,000 a month, and the picket fence has been replaced by a lifetime of precarious renting. This isn't just about high prices, it's about the death of the future. When a society stops believing its children can own a piece of the land they live on, the foundation of that society begins to crumble. We are seeing a mass exodus of talent as our brightest minds flee to the US, seeking a life where their hard work actually translates into equity. The Bank of Canada's interest rate hikes were meant to cool this fever, but for many, they were the final blow. As those 5-year fixed rates from the pandemic era expire, a wave of mortgage shock is about to hit. But wait until you see the hidden tax that no one talks about, the one that's stealing your wealth before you even see your paycheck.
Canada is suffering from a productivity paradox that has economists terrified. While our neighbors to the south are innovating and expanding, Canada's business investment has been stagnant for a decade. We have become a nation that doesn't build things anymore. We just trade houses back and forth to each other. Our GDP is increasingly propped up by a bloated real estate sector and government spending, rather than genuine industrial growth. This is a shadow fact that politicians avoid. Our standard of living is actually declining relative to the rest of the developed world. We are working longer hours for less purchasing power, stuck in a low-growth trap that feels like treading water in a freezing rake. The emotional toll of this stagnation is a sense of stuckness. You work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, yet your savings account barely moves. The CRA takes its bite, the carbon tax adds its weight, and the cost of everything from car insurance to internet service, some of the highest in the world, erodes whatever is left. We are being bled dry by 1,000 small cuts. But there is a specific policy decision made in Ottawa 3 years ago that accelerated this decline. It involves the way we handle our national debt, and the consequences are about to become very, very real. The Bank of Canada is walking a razor's edge, and we are the ones feeling the blade. Every time Tiff Macklem speaks, thousands of Canadian families hold their breath. The interest rate cliff is real. Between 2024 and 2026, nearly half of all Canadian mortgages will come up for renewal. For many, this means their monthly payments will jump by $1,000, $1,500, or even $2,000. This isn't extra money people have lying around. This is the vacation fund, the RRSP for the kids, and the grocery budget being liquidated just to keep a roof overhead. The emotional pain of house poverty is a unique kind of hell. You own $1 million asset, but you can't afford to take your spouse out for a pizza. You are rich on paper and broke in reality. This disconnect is creating a mental health crisis across the country as the stress of impending renewal looms like a dark cloud. People are checking their banking apps with trembling fingers, praying for a rate cut that might never come in time. The central bank is trying to fight inflation, but they are doing it on the backs of the middle class. And while you struggle to pay your mortgage, the government is struggling with a different kind of debt, one that might lead to a currency devaluation you didn't see coming.
The CRA is often viewed as an inevitable force of nature, but lately, the tax bite in Canada has become more of a mauling. Between federal income tax, provincial tax, CPP, EI, and the ever-controversial carbon tax, the average Canadian family spends more on taxes than they do on food, clothing, and shelter combined. Let that sink in. You are working more than half the year just to fund a government that many feel is failing to provide basic services. The wait times at the ER are soaring, the roads are crumbling, and the bureaucracy is expanding. This creates a visceral sense of injustice. You pay into the system faithfully, but when you need a doctor or a passport, the system is experiencing higher than normal volumes. It feels like a betrayal of the Canadian promise. We were told that high taxes were the price we paid for a civilized society, but as the quality of life drops, that bargain feels increasingly lopsided. People are looking at their pay stubs in disbelief, seeing thousands of dollars vanish before they can even buy a liter of milk. This tax burden is killing the incentive to work harder. Why take that promotion if the CRA takes 50% of the raise? But there's a deeper crisis brewing in our infrastructure that no amount of tax money seems to fix.
Canada's immigration policy was once the envy of the world, a balanced, points-based system that brought in the best and brightest. But in recent years, the targets have been ramped up so aggressively that our infrastructure is screaming for mercy. We are adding 1 million people a year to a country that isn't building enough houses, hospitals, or schools to accommodate them. This isn't a critique of the people coming here. It's a critique of a math problem that doesn't add up. The result is a surge in rental demand that is driving prices to astronomical levels, hurting both newcomers and longtime residents alike. There is a palpable tension in our cities, a feeling that the system is being pushed to a breaking point. You see it in the crowded buses, the overflowing walk-in clinics, and the tent cities popping up in public parks. The curiosity gap here is, why is the government doubling down on these numbers despite the obvious strain? Some experts suggest it's a desperate attempt to keep the GDP from showing a technical recession, essentially using population growth to mask economic decline. It's a house of cards, and the wind is picking up. But what happens when the very people we are bringing in realize the Canadian dream is more of a nightmare?
The new poor in Canada don't look like the poor of the past. They are people with university degrees, full-time jobs, and clean clothes. They are the hidden struggling class who shop at thrift stores not out of style, but out of necessity. They carry the emotional weight of a failed adulthood, unable to provide the lifestyle they grew up with. This is the psychological erosion of the Canadian identity. We used to be a nation of stability. Now we are a nation of anxiety. The middle class is being squeezed from both ends, stagnant wages on one side and a skyrocketing cost of living on the other. This disappearing middle is creating a two-tier society. Those who bought real estate 20 years ago and are sitting on millions, and everyone else who is effectively a serf to the landlord class. The social mobility that made Canada great is being replaced by a neo-feudalism, where your success depends more on your parents' home equity than your own hard work. This realization is bitter and heavy. It leads to a sense of hopelessness that is manifesting in our national discourse. But there is a silent killer in your portfolio that is making this even worse.
the mistakes we are making with our TFSAs and RRSPs.
Many Canadians are using their credit cards and home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, as an unofficial social safety net. When the paycheck doesn't cover the car repair or the kids' braces, the plastic comes out. We are now seeing credit card delinquencies rise to levels not seen since the financial crisis. This is the debt spiral, a cycle where you pay interest on interest, and the principal never shrinks. The emotional pain of debt is a heavy, suffocating blanket. It keeps you up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, calculating how many years of work it will take to be free. The banks, meanwhile, are reporting record margins on that very interest. It feels like the system is designed to keep you in a state of perpetual almost broke. You are just wealthy enough to keep borrowing, but never wealthy enough to stop. This cycle is unsustainable. If a major wave of layoffs hits, the entire deck of cards collapses because there is zero margin for error. We are a nation living on a tightrope with no net. But there's another system that's failing alongside our wallets, and it's the one we were told would always be there to catch us: our healthcare.
The Canadian healthcare crisis is no longer a wait time issue. It's a systemic failure. The visceral fear of being sick in Canada is growing. We've all heard the stories: 12 hours in an ER waiting room, months for an MRI, years to find a family doctor. This is the hidden cost of our economic malaise. When the government is spending so much on debt servicing and a bloated civil service, the frontline services suffer. This creates a terrifying reality for the middle class. If you get a serious illness, the system you've paid into your whole life might not be able to save you in time. We are seeing the rise of medical tourism and private clinics for those who can afford it, creating a two-tier system by default. The emotional pain of seeing a loved one suffer while waiting for a specialist is a uniquely Canadian trauma. We were raised to believe our healthcare was our national pride, but now it feels like a broken promise. This failure is a symptom of a larger economic rot, a country that can no longer afford its own ideals. But while healthcare crumbles, our young talent is making a radical choice. They aren't waiting for the system to fix itself. They are leaving.
The brain drain is back, and it's more aggressive than ever. Canada's most ambitious graduates are looking at the math and realizing that the US offers 30% higher salaries and 50% lower housing costs. When you lose your doctors, your tech founders, and your engineers, you lose the engine of your future economy. This exodus is a silent catastrophe. It's the sound of the future leaving on a one-way flight to Austin, Seattle, or Raleigh. For those who stay, the frustration of seeing their careers thrive elsewhere is a constant emotional drain. We are becoming a training ground for the global economy. We pay for the education, and other countries reap the rewards. This is a shadow fact that the government downplays. Our human capital is leaking out of the country. Without these innovators, Canada is left with a commodity and real estate economy that lacks the dynamism to compete in the 21st century. The curiosity gap is, what happens to a country when only the people who can't leave are left behind? The social and economic consequences are staggering. And this lack of innovation is tied directly to our resource curse, the wealth we have in the ground that we refuse to use.
Canada sits on one of the greatest treasure troves of natural resources on the planet. We have the oil, the gas, the gold, and the critical minerals the world desperately needs for the green transition. And yet, we can't seem to get anything to market. Regulatory hurdles, endless litigation, and political indecision have turned our resource sector into a graveyard of canceled projects. This is the resource curse in reverse. We have the wealth, but we are choosing to be poor. The emotional pain is felt most sharply in the West and in rural communities, where high-paying jobs have vanished, replaced by government dependency. It's a tragedy of missed opportunity. While the world looks to dictatorships for energy, Canada's ethical, regulated resources stay trapped in the ground. This isn't just about the environment. It's about a failure to build a self-sustaining economy. We are importing what we should be exporting. This economic masochism is one of the primary reasons our dollar is struggling and our growth is anemic. But the failure to build isn't limited to pipelines. It's happening in our retail sector too, as major brands decide that Canada is no longer a viable place to do business. Have you noticed the empty storefronts in your local mall? The retail apocalypse has hit Canada with a unique vengeance. Names that were staples of Canadian life for decades are vanishing. Target failed, Nordstrom left, and many others are scaling back. Why? Because the Canadian consumer is tapped out. When 60% of your income goes to rent and groceries, there is nothing left for the discretionary economy. This is a warning sign of a hollowed-out economy. A healthy nation has a violent retail sector, fueled by a confident middle class. Instead, we have a landscape of dollar stores and high-end boutiques, with nothing in between. The emotional impact is a loss of community and a sense of decline. Our main streets are becoming rows of vape shops and for lease signs. This is the visual representation of a dying middle class. We are becoming a nation of extractors, large corporations extracting what little wealth is left from a struggling population. This retail death spiral is a leading indicator of the broader collapse experts fear. But there's a personal financial mistake many are making in the midst of this, raiding their future to pay for their present.
The retirement dream for Canadians is being dismantled in real time. The RRSP and TFSA were designed to be vehicles for long-term wealth, but increasingly, they are being used as emergency funds. People are withdrawing their savings to cover mortgage spikes or to help their adult children survive the rent crisis. This is a generational theft occurring in slow motion. When you raid your RRSP, you aren't just losing the money, you're losing the decades of compounded growth that were supposed to support you in your old age. The emotional pain of this is a deep, quiet desperation. It's the realization that you may never be able to stop working. The Freedom 55 dream has been replaced by work until you drop. Many seniors are returning to the workforce, taking entry-level jobs because their pensions can't keep up with the cost of a bag of grapes. This is a visceral betrayal of the Canadian promise that if you work hard and play by the rules, you will be taken care of. The curiosity gap. How did a country as rich as ours end up with a senior population that is terrified of the grocery store? The answer lies in our crumbling infrastructure and the hidden costs of living here.
If you live in the GTA or Vancouver, you know the soul-crushing reality of Canadian infrastructure. The 401 is a parking lot. The transit systems are decades behind our global peers. We are a G7 nation with the transit infrastructure of a developing country in many regions. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a massive drain on our economic productivity. Billions of dollars are lost every year as people and goods sit idling in traffic. The emotional toll is a persistent daily frustration, a sense of being trapped in a system that doesn't work. We pay some of the highest taxes and fuel costs in the world, yet we are stuck in gridlock. This infrastructure lag is a symptom of a country that has stopped investing in its future and started spending all its money on the present. We are eating our seed corn, consuming the wealth that should be used to build the bridges and rails of tomorrow. This stagnation makes our cities less livable and our businesses less competitive. But the rot isn't just in our roads, it's in our financial institutions, where a lack of competition is costing you thousands.
Canada's Big Five banks are often praised for their stability, but for the average consumer, they represent a crushing oligopoly. We pay some of the highest banking fees in the world, whether it's account fees, investment commissions, or the spread on currency exchange. The Canadian financial system is designed to skim off the top of every transaction you make. This banking tax is a silent drain on your wealth. There is a lack of real competition, meaning there's little incentive for these giants to innovate or lower costs for you. The emotional pain here is the feeling of being nickeled and dimed at every turn. You feel it when you see the convenience fee on your statement or the abysmal interest rates on your savings account. We are being held captive by a system that prioritizes shareholder dividends over consumer value. This lack of competition extends to our telecom and airline industries as well, creating a high cost of living trap that is unique to Canada. But what happens to the backbone of our economy, the small businesses, under this pressure? Small businesses are the lifeblood of any economy, but in Canada, they are being suffocated. Between rising commercial rents, labor shortages, and an ever-growing mountain of red tape, being an entrepreneur in Canada has never been harder. During the pandemic, many took on CEBA loans just to survive, and now the bill has come due. We are seeing a wave of small business bankruptcies that will hollow out our local communities. The emotional pain is visceral for the owners who have poured their life savings into a dream, only to watch it be dismantled by factors beyond their control. When a local cafe or hardware store closes, a piece of the community dies with it. This is the small business death spiral.
As they close, we become more dependent on the large, faceless corporations that don't care about our neighborhoods. This loss of entrepreneurship means less innovation and less wealth staying within our borders. It's a tragedy that is being ignored by the headlines. But there's another debt crisis that is often overlooked: the mountain of student loans held by a generation that can't find work in their field.
For decades, we told our children that a university degree was the golden ticket to the middle class. Today, for many, it's a debt trap. Canadian students are graduating with tens of thousands of dollars in debt into an economy that doesn't have enough high-paying jobs to support them. We have the most educated workforce in the world, yet many are working in retail or service jobs just to keep up with their loan payments. This education debt is a heavy anchor at the start of their lives. The emotional pain is a sense of betrayal. A did everything they were told to do, but the reward isn't there. This debt prevents them from buying homes, starting families, or investing in the economy. It's a lost generation in the making. The curiosity gap. Why do we keep subsidizing degrees that the market doesn't need, while we have a desperate shortage of skilled tradespeople? This disconnect is a primary driver of our economic inefficiency. And as this generation struggles, the gap between the haves and have-nots in Canada is widening into a canyon. The wealth gap in Canada is no longer a gap, it's a chasm. While the average worker struggles to buy eggs, the top 1% have seen their net worth explode, largely driven by the housing bubble and corporate consolidation. This inequality is toxic to a democracy. It creates a two candidates reality. One Canada vacations in Europe and buys property in cash. The other Canada uses buy now, pay later for school supplies. This disparity is visible in every major city, where luxury condos owe over growing encampments of the unhoused. The emotional weight of this inequality is a breakdown in social cohesion. It leads to anger, polarization, and a loss of faith in our institutions. We are losing the polite Canadian consensus as the struggle for survival becomes more acute. This isn't just about envy. It's about the basic unfairness of a system where the rules seem to apply differently depending on your net worth. But the most terrifying part is how this current era mirrors the most painful periods in economic history. Some economists are beginning to use a chilling term, the silent depression. While the official numbers try to avoid the R word, the lived experience of Canadians feels remarkably like the 1930s in terms of purchasing power and housing security. We are seeing a return to multi-generational living, not out of choice, but out of desperation. Food bank usage is at an all-time high, with a significant percentage of users being people with full-time jobs. This is a shadow fact that should haunt every politician. If the people working 40 hours a week can't afford to eat, the system has already failed. The emotional pain of working poverty is a slow-motion trauma. It erodes your dignity and your hope. We are a nation in a state of high-functioning collapse. We look fine on the outside, but the internal organs, our economy, our healthcare, our housing, are failing. This silent depression is the reality that no one in power wants to name, because naming it would require admitting that the policies of the last decade have been a catastrophe. The world still views Canada as a peaceful, prosperous paradise, but the perception is lagging behind the reality. Foreign investors are starting to pull back, seeing the cracks in our housing-heavy economy. Our global reputation is being tested as we struggle to meet our commitments, and our growth slows to a crawl. This disconnect between global perception and Canadian reality is a curiosity gap that will soon close with a bang. When the world finally realizes that the Canadian miracle was largely a real estate bubble fueled by cheap debt, the correction will be painful. The emotional impact for Canadians will be a loss of national pride, the realization that we are no longer the shining city on a hill for the middle class. We are becoming a cautionary tale of what happens when a country stops focusing on productivity and starts focusing on debt. But there is a way out, though it requires a level of honesty and courage we haven't seen in years. What is the final warning for those watching? The final warning is this: the collapse isn't a single event, it's a process. We are in the middle of it right now. The experts fear a hard landing, a sharp correction in housing prices, a surge in unemployment, and a currency crisis. For you, the viewer, this means the time for business as usual is over. You must become your own central bank.
Protect your TFSA by diversifying outside of just Canadian banks. Reevaluate your debt before the next wave of renewals. Understand that the government cannot, and perhaps will not, save you from the consequences of this economic shift. The emotional pain of the coming years can be mitigated by preparation. This is a call to wake up to the shadow facts and stop living in the maple leaf mirage. Canada is still a great land, but the economy is broken and it will take a generation to fix. Your mission is to survive the transition. The curiosity gap remains. Will we learn from these mistakes, or will we continue to drift toward the waterfall? The choice and the preparation is yours. Stay informed, stay critical, and most importantly,